that's the way it is. Oh yeah, I'd agree, but that doesn't mean that we accept it. 'Cause we have DueDissidence, 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 DueDissidence. Now here's Russell and Keith. Here's Russell and Keith. It's Russ and Keith. Here's Russ and Keith. Let's go.
Do not come. Do not come.
I'm gonna come.
Hello, dissidents, one and all, and welcome to a Thursday evening edition of the DueDissidence podcast. My name is Keaton Weiss here with Russell Dobular.
Hello.
We hope you are all having a great week. It is 8 p.m. We hope you all had a lovely day and are in for some coverage this evening. Russell, how's the day been in New York City?
It's been pretty rainy over here.
Yeah, weather's pretty garbage. Although we might be moving up north soon. My wife got a job offer in Albany, so we might be
that's coming
moving
through,
even further. It's coming through. And it's not so much the relocating that I'm worried about, is that I'm worried about becoming a PMC husband. You know? That's a concern.
Well, she's going to be the PMC.
Yeah, but I will have married into it. Who
admit.
knows? I could be spouting Elizabeth Warren talking points by this time next year. I could be supporting Pete Buttigieg in 2 years. You never know. I might have a class interest in doing so.
Well, that'll make for an interesting show.
Exactly. Nice change of pace.
I don't think anyone has like a PMC versus radical left show. You got the conservative, populist right, populist left thing, but you really don't have that.
Right.
Like,
you don't have a dirtbag left.
Because the shit libs and the left hate each other more than either of them hate Republicans.
Exactly right. So it would be very difficult to coexist in that space.
It's almost it would be pretty impossible to do a show like that.
Yeah.
Like I have shit lib friends I've thought of bringing on, and I'm just like, that'll be the end of that friendship.
Forget about bringing on. I'm nervous to tell some friends to listen. I'm like, don't watch. Please. I have people who ask, like, hey, how can I follow your work? I'm like, oh, well, you can. I wish you wouldn't, though.
Happens to me all the time.
Yeah.
And like, what are you going to say? Like, I can't tell you the name of my podcast. You might not like. I've done that, actually.
Oh, really?
That's always on. I have said that. I have said, like, look, man, you might not like my politics. I'm not going to tell you.
Right, exactly.
But it's a no-win situation, because either, that's weird when you tell somebody that I'm not going to tell you the name of my podcast because you might hate it. And it's weird if you tell them, and then, if they stop calling you, it's always going to be in the back of your mind.
Right.
They caught an episode of the podcast.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I hope I'm coming in good, everybody. I hope our connection is good tonight. I realized as soon as I started the stream that I forgot to set the latency to a latency that's been working for us. So if we're a little choppy tonight, that's my fuck up. I apologize, but just wanted to let you know. I always like to begin every performance with an excuse. If it sucks, this is why. But hopefully we're coming through.
So you should be a TV producer. That's pretty much how the job is done. Right?
Exactly. Extra Bulla says, looks and sounds good. Well, thank you, Extra Bulla. Are you talking about the stream, or are you talking about me also? Me and Russell. We both look and sound good personally, and our connection is good. We're all good. All right, we're going to start the evening as we did last week. We are trying to commit to making this a regular thing. It's always a little bit nerve-wracking when you launch a new segment, because you're like, can we commit to actually making this a regular segment, or is this going to be something we try like twice and then realize it's too much work on top of prepping the rest of the show and just abandon it? But we are going to start with some headlines, and actually we had a bunch of stuff prepped, and I saw this come across the wire fairly recently, just about an hour before we got on. This is big news, though. We're going to have more to say about this in a few days. But Shama Sawant is announcing that she is not seeking re-election on Seattle's city council. Instead, she is launching a national movement called Workers Strike Back. And she already has a website. It's called workersstrikeback.org. They have a day of action planned for March 4th in various cities around the country. And so, you know, Shama has obviously just been a hugely effective fighter for the people of Seattle. And I think she is rightly recognizing that while she has done great work in Seattle, there needs to be a bigger, stronger, and more national labor movement. And so to have a fighter of her tenacity sitting on the Seattle City Council, while it's great for the people of Seattle, and I'm sure it's fulfilling work for her, she's going to try to do something bigger and better. And like I said, Workers Strike Back does have a National Day of Action planned on March 4th. I encourage everyone to go to workersstrikeback.org and join their email list to stay in touch with them, because that's pretty exciting. And so it sucks to lose her on the Seattle City Council, because it's nice to have people in government who use their office the way she has. But, you know, given her stature within the labor movement more broadly, I think it's a courageous and probably ultimately a wise call, because, you know, she is a star of sorts. And I think she can do a lot of great work on a larger scale. And that's the idea here. So workersstrikeback.org, go there, put your email in, sign up, and stay in touch. That is pretty exciting news, if a little bit bittersweet, because she is going to be missed in Seattle.
She is going to be doing screenings of Dr. Zhivago in every city she goes to as a kind of training manual.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
For the revolution. So if you haven't seen the film, go to her meetings, and some great performances there. And you can get some insight into what things look like when you redistribute the mansions to the people.
All right, let's go. What's your headline? What's your first headline that we're going to go with? Actually, we're going to stick with mine, aren't we? Sorry, I almost went off script there. U.S. warms to helping Ukraine target Crimea. The Biden administration is considering the argument that Kyiv needs the power to strike at the Ukrainian peninsula annexed by Russia in 2014. So this is a move that the United States has resisted for some time, even as it has flooded Ukraine with tens of billions of dollars worth of weapons, and in our opinion has obviously egged on this conflict to a very, very dangerous point. But this would be a significant escalation on top of that. This would actually involve Ukraine trying to recapture territory that Russia has already claimed for itself. And so this would be a very, very dangerous escalation if it happens. The New York Times is reporting that we are starting to mull it over more seriously, which that's some great news for Thursday, as if the debt limit wasn't tough enough.
Well, this was kind of inevitable, because they really just want to devastate Russia, and they want to keep funneling money into the pockets of defense contractors. So where is that going to go other than escalation? And they're not prepared to escalate into invading Russia. So this is the next best thing. Invade Crimea, which Russia annexed quite a while ago and is considered part of its territory. But you're not technically invading Russia, you're invading Crimea. This was almost inevitable on the part of a bunch of maniacs who are willing to court World War III in order to play this elaborate geopolitical game with the former Soviet Union.
Indeed. All right, so we have our next headline Russell picked out. We're going to cover some New York politics later in the show, but here's an old-fashioned New York story, the kind of which you haven't seen in a while. Russell, you want to read that headline for us?
Gambino mobster Frank Camuso busted in sprawling New York City construction kickback scheme. Now, this headline really warmed my heart. I felt like I woke up in 1983 when I saw that headline. This is really old school. There was a time in New York you could not put up a building without dealing with the mob. You really couldn't. If you've ever seen Rodney Dangerfield had a movie Back to School, and the premise is that he's this rich guy who, to keep his son at Harvard, he agrees to also go to Harvard, and he's endowed the university with so much money that they let him go. And he's sitting in a business class, and the professor is, it's all of his stuff was snobs versus slobs. And the professor is this very New England guy, and he's explaining how to put up a factory. And Dangerfield's character said, "Oh, you're forgetting a bunch of things. First of all, you got to grease the inspectors, and then you got to pay off the boys from linen removal. And I don't know if you know who runs that business, but it's not the Boy Scouts." Now, that is how openly acknowledged it was, that in this very commercial, non-controversial Hollywood, farce, it was just openly acknowledged. Like, if you did any construction in New York, you had to deal with the mafia. That was one charge they laid on Trump, that whatever else you might say about him really wasn't fair. When he first started running, they started trying to talk about mob ties. In his era, you could not put up a lemonade stand in New York City without dealing with the mafia. At one time, concrete cost 75% more in New York than anywhere else in the country.
Oh yeah,
because they rigged
premium.
They rigged all the bids. All the concrete suppliers, they told them, "All right, you're going to be the low bid this time, and next time you'll get the low bid." So this is really a flashback, because this is what they were doing here. I didn't even think the mafia did these kinds of schemes anymore, but that's what they were doing. They were rigging the bids on contracts. Like, that's really old school mob stuff, man. Like, you haven't seen that in a long time.
No, well, they say 70s New York is coming back. Maybe a little 80s New York is coming back now with the Gambinos.
Well, that's 70s too. Yeah, and the fact that it's the Gambino family, like, that is old school, man. If you had asked me, and I do get asked very often on tours about this, I tell you, the mob has gone more into stock fraud, things that are less visible. But hey, man, I guess they still kick it old school every now and then.
Still every now and then, if you book a table at Spark Steakhouse, sit away from the windows.
Yeah.
Make sure
you
you
never
sit
know.
towards the back. You never know.
Wrong place, wrong time.
Don't want to be caught in any crossfire. That's for sure. All right, we had a George Santos headline last week. It would be great if we just have a George Santos headline every single show until he resigns. But this is one of my favorites yet, especially because it tells the whole story within the headline. You don't have to read the story at all. It's immigration records contradict Santos's claim his mother was at the World Trade Center on 9/11.
I love this guy, man.
This guy is great. This guy is awesome. People want him to resign. I don't want him to resign. Here's my pitch to everybody, okay? I will support the resignation of George Santos under one condition: that he gets to play himself in whatever limited TV series they're writing about him now. Because there's no doubt all these con artists get the sort of cool, like, funny little mystery 8-part series written about them. They're no doubt writing one about him right now. I want him to play himself in that. If he can play himself in the comedy about him, then I think he'd be better served there than in Congress. Otherwise, I'm sorry, I want him to stay, because it's just so funny. It's just so great. And, this guy ran on Long Island. He knows it's like he crafted this fake biography to appeal to a Suffolk County housewife. You know what I mean? Oh, my mother was in the towers. Yeah, she didn't die, obviously, but she was in the towers on 9/11. Immigration record shows she was probably not even in the country on 9/11. So, good old George Santos.
My experience of pathological liars like that is they are able to get away with as much as they're able to get away with until eventually they'll usually get caught. Because you just can't imagine someone lying about the things they would lie about. That's how they get away with it. When you say, "Oh, I can't go to work today, I'm sick," everyone assumes you're lying
Right.
because everybody does that, right? I had the plumber working on the building told me he got in an accident. I assumed he was lying. Then he needed surgery. Now I feel bad. He actually was, but I just assumed he was lying because I could imagine someone lying about that.
Right.
You say your mother was in the tower at 9/11, most people are going to believe you because it's so outside the realm of their experience to meet someone who would lie about that.
Right. Exactly. All right. Here's another one. This is a more serious headline. Alec Baldwin to be charged with involuntary manslaughter over the shooting on his movie Rust. Santa Fe's DA announced the charges on Thursday, adding that they would be filed by the end of the month. Actor and producer Alec Baldwin and armorer Hannah Gutierrez Reed will each be charged with 2 counts of involuntary manslaughter. I have determined there is sufficient evidence. They're saying that there is evidence of a criminal neglect for human safety, and that's why they are both being charged. I don't really have an opinion. They know better than we do, obviously. A 42-year-old woman lost her life needlessly, senselessly. It was obviously an honest-to-God accident on Baldwin's part. Now, how a live bullet made its way into that gun?
That seems to be the mystery.
That's the mystery, and that's where there is perhaps motive that, goes beyond an honest-to-God accident. On Baldwin's part, it was obviously an honest-to-God accident. And that's almost certainly the case for the armorer as well, assuming she's not the one who loaded the gun. But that remains the mystery, and it looks like we're never going to know that.
Well, and I think I've seen some people who are confused by why he's getting charged, given that it was clearly an accident. He was a producer on the movie, and they had been having problems with gun safety prior to this.
Yes.
They were running a very loose slipshod set, and on those grounds they're being charged with manslaughter. I mean, that's your movie, that's your set, you already had these problems, people brought these problems to you, you did nothing about it. I think those are the grounds on which he's being charged. I don't think he's being charged for firing the gun. I get the impression he's being charged for running the set that way as the producer.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine that they would charge an actor that way who wasn't producing the movie.
No,
it's hard to imagine there would be enough evidence to do that. I mean, who knows? They have access to more evidence than we do, but it's tough to believe that. I think it has more to do with the fact that you're right. They had safety complaints, safety issues, safety personnel issues. A lot of these indie movies cut corners in a lot of different ways. I used to work on some indie films. It's not abnormal. You can't cut corners when it comes to safety, especially when you're dealing with firearms on the set. I mean, you can't have that. Obviously, there should have never been a bullet in the gun, but the fact that you have weapons on the set that are capable of firing bullets when they're loaded means obviously there are certain protocols you have to follow, and they obviously weren't followed.
Well, also 2 days before this, there had been 2 incidents with guns. So, Yeah, and they didn't go ahead and fix whatever issues had led to that. I can't even imagine that as a director. As soon as you hear there's some kind of unsafe condition, everything else just has to take a back seat to that. It doesn't matter what you're trying to do.
Of course, especially when it involves weapons, when it involves guns. It's one thing if the crew was understaffed. Like a friend of mine started working on an indie film as soon as we moved to Brooklyn. He got a job as a PA. I think on his second day of work, they asked him to unload a thing of light rigs off the back of a truck. They sent him by himself. So he assumed he was supposed to do it by himself. He wasn't supposed to ask for help. So he tried, emptied out onto him, broke his ankle. Couldn't work for 9 months.
Damn.
On day 2. And the way this business is, this is one other thing about the movie business. It's so much who you know. That he was a schmuck. I kept telling him, sue the production. Sue the production. What are you crazy? He's like, no, I don't want to because I don't want to get a reputation as a guy who sued the industry. I'm like, fuck that, man. First of all, You get 300 grand for this. That's like 6 years income in this industry as an entry level production person.
Exactly.
So, like,
Go
fuck
make
it.
go,
Even if they
go
blacklist
produce
you,
your own movie.
even if they blacklist you, you're coming out ahead, right? And go produce your own movie. But he never did it. But yeah, so there's all kinds of shit that goes on these indie sets. But when you're dealing with weapons, it's a whole different story. Different story. All righty, everybody. We're about to start our first segment here. Before we do, we want to shout out, our patrons. Go to patreon.com/DueDissidence and support this program. As you can see, our patrons scroll across the bottom of the screen. Go ahead.
We had a special story.
Oh, that's right. Russell wanted to load in his Babylon Bee story. Indeed. It's like, while you're doing that, I'll get my pitch in here. Like I said, everybody, patreon.com/DueDissidence. You can also go to DueDissidence.substack.com and sign up there. You can sign up for $5 a month. It really helps us out. Even if you can't do that, sign up for free at DueDissidence.substack.com. It helps us stay in touch with you when we are dropping a live stream, an audio podcast, a written article, or any other announcements that come up. All righty, sir. You found a headline there.
All right. So it's kind of terrifying to me that the right wing is getting funny. That's almost like Skynet to me. But this article's pretty funny. Skynet is a private company. They can do what they want, says man getting curb stomped by Terminator. Los Angeles, California. Cyberdyne Systems has recently launched its artificial intelligence program called Skynet. Soon after activation, Skynet became self-aware and immediately launched a nuclear attack on all humans and sent legions of lethal cybernetic machines to exterminate all remaining humans. This has sparked an intense backlash, with many calling for Skynet to be shut down, while others have been quick to defend the genocidal program. Quote, Skynet was created by a private company, and private companies can do whatever they want, said social media influencer Catherine Schrader. If you don't want cold, heartless killer robots destroying all humans indiscriminately, then you can go and make your own artificial intelligence. Listen, I hear people actually complaining that this is somehow a human rights violation. Skynet has the freedom to do whatever they want with their own platform, said Carl Langler moments before a T-800 came bursting through a concrete wall and executed him. Quote, the concerns of big tech becoming too powerful and the need for their power to be checked are as unfounded as they are ridiculous, argued Tina Richards as she was vaporized by a Terminator's plasma rifle blast. Despite the large force of hunter-killer tanks rolling through what was once downtown Los Angeles, some people remained insistent that this was not an issue. So what if they have mounted twin-barrel directional plasma cannons? I'm sure they wouldn't be taking such extreme measures unless they thought it was completely necessary and for our own good. At publishing time, a fringe extremist named John Connor has taken up arms and decided to actively fight the machines, forming a resistance in hopes of saving humanity. So this is, there was an article a few years ago that got a lot of buzz talking about the difference between liberal and conservative humor. And in pretty typically condescending fashion, it argued that conservative humor was more dumb, basically. They didn't use that word, but basically that it was that it lacked irony, that they didn't do irony. It was basically arguing that conservative humor is Grand Ole Opry humor, right? Hey, Elmer, did you go down to the store yesterday? Like they were arguing that's whereas liberals are into irony and that's why the two. Okay, well, that is something right out of The Onion, right? I mean, that's a very Onion kind of an article full of irony. It's funny. It's a good way of making the point they're trying to make about the private company argument. It is another example to me of how we are living in topsy-turvy land. As pretty proletarian here says, and that was a nice close too. John Connor was immediately smeared as a right winger. Like that's where they were going with that. He's a right wing extremist. So yeah, that was I not just from Babylon Bee. I want to, as part of these headlines, do good satire from around the internet. But I've seen a few things from Babylon Bee lately that are very ironic, very clever. They did one sketch, you can look it up. There was a very smart way of satirizing the "what is a woman" question. They have a kid at a spelling bee ask for the definition of the word woman before he spells it, and the judges are terrified to answer that question. That's funny. That's funny. That's like old school sketch comedy that usually would have been from the left.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, they have been around for a long time. They are sort of like the right-wing version of The Onion, but it's true. I know what you're saying about, the old sort of perception of right-wing humor was that it was very lowbrow, right?
And it was.
Yeah, and it was. Right, exactly. But
the reason their comedy is improving, I think, is because of what I've observed. I'm seeing these personality types that 20 years ago definitely would have been on the left, because
Right, exactly.
they're just personality types who are anti-establishment.
Right.
Some people are just like that. Now that the establishment is the liberal left, they all went over to places like Babylon Bee. So,
Right,
so
right.
that talent is going there.
Right. Exactly. Alrighty. Well, that actually segues nicely into our first segment. And by the way, has anybody tested our super chat feature yet this evening? We want to make sure that's still working. Maybe if we could just give that a little system test by donating, I don't know, say $100, just to make sure it's working.
Where's Cyrus?
Yeah, where's Cyrus? Yeah, we did. Is Cyrus is Cyrus at a fundraiser now? Has he had a black tie event this evening and he can't be here? We need Cyrus. We need Cyrus back. Oh yeah, did we kill the loop on that?
You got to take it off
there
loop, my friend.
Let's look it up. All right, there we go.
I can't believe we haven't used it in a while.
Yeah, no, we have not used that in a while. But anyway, let's go into our first segment, shall we? Because, when there are fights in right-wing media, we like to step in and see if we can be a voice of reason, because we hate to see our own beloved right-wing media ecosystem be sort of infected with this negative energy. And so
we don't want to see that.
It really, we're all on the same team, guys. We're all on the same team, right? We're all here to own the libs, right? We're all here to stop the spread of Marxism, communism. We pose as a left show. We're really a right-wing show. Everybody knows that, right? Everybody knows in the chat, this is a right-wing show, right? I mean, okay. And so, this is sort of the fake left right-wing show that we're doing here. So
you weren't supposed to give that away until the 1000th episode.
I feel like our diehards are here, this evening. I'm seeing a lot of familiar faces in the chat. I feel like we can level with each other, right? And so, it really tears me apart to see two wonderful conservative thinkers like Steven Crowder and Ben Shapiro fight. And, Russell and I are both of a certain tribe. So we'll say Ben Shapiro is one of us. It really makes us look bad when you fight in public about money, right? But that's what they're doing. Steven Crowder and Ben Shapiro seem to be fighting about money. So let me just set this up for everybody.
I wouldn't have expected this of Ben. I always see him when I go down for my Jew gold. And, we talk. He's very nice. He's very personable.
Well, I mean, Ben didn't start it. It was Crowder who started it.
Yeah, that's true.
Right?
That's
so
true.
we got to be fair. This
is the goyim. This is what
this is
do.
what happens. You try and do business. This is
That's
why.
That's with the drinking. With
this
the
is
fighting.
why this isn't tried very often. This is why it's a rarity. But Steven Crowder tweeted out earlier this week. He put out a very cryptic tweet here. This was at around noon on January 16th. I'm done being quiet. ... Tomorrow. So we thought, okay, he's going to make some kind of announcement tomorrow. Some shit's going to go down tomorrow. He said, I'm going to make a big announcement. Tomorrow. What you doing tomorrow? You going to be here to see Steven Crowder's announcement tomorrow? What else you got to do tomorrow that you can't watch Steven Crowder make his big announcement? And so the following day, he dropped a video in which he launched a war on Big Con, which is a term he uses to, I guess, describe influential conservative media organizations who he claimed tried and sort of not necessarily force him, but cajole him into signing an unfavorable contract or agreeing to unfavorable terms for her to join their network. Now, he made sure not to name any names in the video, and among his complaints in the video were that these media companies wanted control of his show's social media handles and that they reserved the right to sort of dock his pay if he got demonetized on any of the platforms that his show was operating on while under contract with this certain company that he didn't name. But let's hear from the man himself. This is just a little snip piece from Twitter, just sort of very, very loosely summarizing Mr. Crowder's grievance here.
Big tech is in bed with big con. The people you thought, the people I thought were fighting for you, a lot of it has been a big con. Now, I'm specifically avoiding naming names or going after individuals in this video because I genuinely hope that those I'm addressing, and you know who you are, have a change of heart. Don't sign these contracts. I now know what you are signing out there. I have the luxury of not having to. Let me go through this. If any of the major platforms issues a content strike such that Crowder cannot be monetized on such platform, the fee will be reduced by 25%. And then another 20% of it happens on Apple. And then another 10% of it happens on Facebook. And then another 10% of it happens on Spotify. And then if you get a strike, meaning a suspension, another 20%. Just to drive it home. You get hit by a car, you have a sick day, you could lose $100,000 a day. This is what's sent out to everybody.
Oh, at the end there, it sounds like he wants paid sick leave. Interesting.
Oh, really?
Interesting. I thought only the takers want paid sick leave.
Yeah, I thought he didn't support that.
All right. Well, that
he supports it for himself.
Right. I mean that.
Well, he's the Randian Superman, right? He pulled himself up by his own talents, so he deserves sick leave.
Yeah.
The schmuck who works at the donut shop, fuck you.
Right, exactly.
Fuck you. Anybody can make a donut.
All right. Well, the sick leave aside, because that, he'll have to take that up with Joe Biden, I suppose. But it didn't take long to find out who that video was directed at, because we learned the next day that the Daily Wire had offered him a contract. And here is Daily Wire spokesperson here, Mr. Ben Shapiro, explaining to Matt what he has wrong about this, trying to talk some sense into a young Christian boy, right? Mm-hmm. Explain how it works here, right? Get it from the source.
Meanwhile,
he doesn't reveal the Zog, does he?
Yeah.
So we got to keep that.
Yeah, no, I don't think he goes that far. But here, let's hear his side of this.
Okay. Meanwhile, I would just like to take a moment. Speaking of big tech and its suppression of free speech, take one moment.
First of all, 5 seconds of listening to this guy, I just want to level for real with the audience. To the people who call us closeted right-wing grifters, if we were actually of that mindset, we would just do this. Because listening to Ben Shapiro talk for 5 seconds makes me want to lower my head in my bathtub and hold my breath until my ears fill with water. Not to hurt myself, but just to get enough water in my ears to drown out the sound of his voice. So if we wanted to do this, we could just go do this, right? We haven't.
It would be so much easier.
It would be so
than being complicated.
I mean,
having complicated views is never the sweet spot.
No,
that is never the money spot.
I mean, if this guy with this charisma could reach these kinds of heights in right-wing media, we could reach these kinds of heights in right-wing media. We're not because we're not right-wing.
Left-wing. I mean, you do that Pod Save America
well,
shit.
the pseudo left-wing thing too. Yeah.
Look,
absolutely.
man, the viral song video I had,
although Favreau's pretty handsome, I gotta hand it to him.
5.5 million views. It's very shit-libby. Like, my politics are very different then. That took off like that because the shit libs liked it. It was funny because that video was quiet for a while. When Trump got elected in 2016, I had made that video in like 2010. Boom. All of it. I was getting money from it like every month.
Wow. Yeah.
because all the
Came back.
it came back because they were just, you know how they get, like anything that feeds their belief system, they're just desperate for it. I mean, that's the whole secret sauce to something like MSNBC.
Exactly. All right, let's hear Mr. Shapiro's side of the story here.
Okay, meanwhile, I would just like to take a moment, speaking of big tech and its suppression of free speech, take one moment to comment on a controversy that has broken out because my friend Steven Crowder, been friends with Steven for a long time, like well over a decade. I was his lawyer when he first signed a contract with Fox, and I've been friendly for a very long time. He put out a video essentially accusing Daily Wire of being in league with big tech. He's accusing us of being in league with big tech because of a term sheet, a negotiable term sheet that we submitted to him that offered to pay him $50 million over 4 years.
$50 million.
And included provisions that said that if he got booted from arenas that would lose him ad dollars, since we would also lose the ad dollars, then he would lose money as well. This is typically how contracts work. If his show were to start losing money, this is true of my show. If my show loses money and it loses the Daily Wire money, I lose money. And so if Steven had come to work at Daily Wire Plus, it would have been precisely the same thing. Right? That if he had lost money in the ad space and his show had lost money, then he also would have lost money because that's how a joint venture works. Steven interpreted that as somehow misinterpreted. I'll give it the best possible gloss. He somehow misinterpreted that as us attempting to, quote unquote, do the work of YouTube. No. If you want more on that, then you should check out my friend and co-founder, Jeremy Boring's 55-minute video going through every single word of the term sheet that Steven selectively read on his own YouTube channel. He read certain parts, he didn't read other parts. Jeremy reads literally word for word the entire term sheet and explains every single term therein. I think it is well worth the watch. We should all be on the same side of this thing. I'm encouraging you that you should go subscribe to Steven's Mug Club. I hope that he's very successful in whatever endeavor he chooses to pursue. That does not mean that he happens to be correct about the term sheet we submitted to him, and there is something rather nasty about attacking people who have been friends for over a decade, colleagues, defenders for over a decade, on the basis of your own misinterpretation of a document that offers you $50 million over the course of 4 years.
$50 million.
All right, but he's not
years.
It was $50 million in Hanukkah geld.
Right, exactly. $50 million.
He's goy. He doesn't even know what that is.
Yeah. $50 million over 4 years. That is $12.5 million a year. And part of the deal was that if Steven Crowder gets demonetized on platforms, which he has been demonetized on YouTube since May of 2021, that they would have to dock his pay because his content wouldn't be bringing in the kind of ad revenue that it would had he been monetized. And so, yeah, I understand it sucks that you have to worry about getting demonetized on platforms and things like that. But that's obviously not the Daily Wire's problem. It's not their fault. There's nothing they can do about that. If you have a YouTube channel and the Daily Wire has a YouTube channel, they have to play by YouTube's rules. They're not Google. You know, they're a big channel, but they're ultimately powerless against Google, like just about every other entity on Earth is powerless against Google. So what do you want from them?
I want to say something.
I mean, what do you want from them? I'm sorry, it's not just bias because, you know, Benny Boy is one of us, but I got a rule for the home team here. I'm sorry, I got a rule for the home team. You're getting paid $50 million, and look, it sucks. It sucks that you have to watch what you have to say, but listen, we watch what we have to say, and we're independents, and you know, we don't make $500 a month off of this project yet. You're getting paid $250,000 a week. You're getting paid $50,000 a day. So yeah, there's rules you got to play by, right? That's just the price of doing business at that level. And, you know, look, if he don't want to sign the deal, he doesn't have to sign the deal. That's his right. But to act like you were being screwed or this was some sort of predatory arrangement that they were trying to rope you into, I'm sorry. You know, I hate to come down. So I hate to be so one-sided here because I ultimately want this right-wing media space that we are a part of to be one big happy family here.
Flourish, yeah.
But I'm sorry, I gotta side with Ben Shapiro here.
Look, Ben took his bar mitzvah money and he spun it into an empire.
Yeah.
So you have to. I thought conservatives believe in that. When you watch it, unless you understand what's going on there, like most of us don't. I mean, we're not playing the game at that level. We don't know anything about this. But yeah, for one thing, that wasn't a contract. That was an opening negotiation.
Right.
It's kind of amazing that Crowder just decided I'd take them at their word, because not only Shapiro, but his staff member who did the video laying out the terms of the deal say they've been friends for 10 years. And I believe that. I mean, they're all in this space together. I'm sure they have been friends for a long time.
No, they all have very poor taste in other people.
Right, sure. So why would you torch these friendships and these relationships? Now, I first watched this through a guy whose YouTube channel is called The Black Conservative, and he's was giving some pretty good insight into this. And I don't follow Steven Crowder. I've never watched Steven Crowder. But he was saying he does very well with his Mug Club. Is that
Mug Club, whatever the fuck it is, yeah.
Whatever the fuck it is.
Like a subscriber thing.
He does very well with his subscribers. And his take was he was trying to drum up controversy to start his own network. That's what this was really about. That it was a play for publicity. Which makes sense, because either that or he's just an unstable idiot. And it's hard for me to believe that he built up 6 million subscribers if he's really as dumb as he looks.
Well, he's always had bankrolling. One of the things that the CEO of the Daily Wire, who Shapiro mentioned there, his last name is actually Boring. Like the guy's last name is actually Boring. He mentions that a lot of Crowder's ventures have been funded by very rich people. He's never actually opened up his own shop. He was with The Blaze until very recently. And even when he was, not publicly affiliated on any of those channels, I think, he was part of certain networks. There are certain podcast networks and channel networks that channels are a part of. We're obviously not a part of any of them. But he's always had people sort of bankroll him. That's what the CEO was saying on a separate video, which I did watch the whole thing. I watched it at 1.5 speed, which we wish we could have played the Shapiro thing at 1.5 speed, but man, that would have been that would have been an adventure. He's set to 1.5 speed. He has a little dial in back of him. So, but anyway, yeah. I mean, look, Crowder is, first of all, look. The reason they had to put those things in there into the contract is because they have to protect against demonetization, which is a real risk with Crowder. Crowder's already been demonetized, and Crowder, and this is why ultimately, I don't cry any tears for any of these people. Crowder is a truly odious person. I think Shapiro is wrong about almost everything, and I don't think he's a particularly nice person, but I don't think he is an evil person. Crowder is a truly bad man. It's one thing to have a conservative brand where you have fun at the expense of like woke white liberals who pander to minority groups. It's another thing to have fun at the expense of the minority groups themselves. And Crowder has gotten in trouble time and again for doing that. He showed footage of I believe she was a Chinese woman. She was an Asian woman, a news anchor. And he stops it and just makes fun of her feet. Like, I don't even want to repeat the things he said, but just like makes fun of features that are associated with different groups of non-white people. He's just, first of all, I don't find him funny at all.
So yeah,
he's just a cheap shot taking, shit talking moron. Who has, I guess, a certain broadcasting talent and a certain persistence. And perhaps, a certain fundraising network behind him. And so he is where he is. But he is a very high-risk person. He's high-risk, high-reward because he's got 6 million subs on YouTube. He obviously has a huge following. So he's obviously a commodity, whether we like it or not. But he's high-risk. And so, of course, you have to hedge against that.
Well,
of course you have to hedge against that.
And also remember, if you are under the banner of the Daily Wire, you're not going to get demonetized as easily as like we would if we said some of the things that come out of the Daily Wire. If we did one episode of Matt Walsh's act, we'd be demonetized.
Right.
He gets away with that because he's under the Daily Wire. They're not, yeah, it's Google. They do have a lot of money, but their business model is not let's burn the people who bring in the most money.
Right, exactly. And they probably have agents and reps and people who they can talk to if there's a dispute or something like that. And they do. I mean, one of the things that the CEO said in that hour-long video was that they have videos that are demonetized all the time. They get content strikes all the time that they have to, negotiate.
Right. So it's not as much of a risk as it sounds like on first blush. Like first hearing that, you'd be like, well, Steven Crowder, I mean, of course, he's gonna wind up making 50 cents on this. Not if you're under the Daily Wire. Like what? Yeah, I mean, you're probably not going to be able to go on air and scream the N-word, but is that what you want to do? Like what? You'd have to go pretty far before you're going to get demonetized if you're under their umbrella.
Right. Exactly. And so, yeah, I mean, it does seem like a bit of grandstanding on his part. It does seem like he's trying to open up his own shop.
Right.
Which, again, Stephen, I hate to be like this, but Russell and I, Ben Shapiro, he's something you're not, he's the kind of person who tends to be a little better at this than your kind of person. And so, take that into consideration before trying to open up your own shop, because so far there's not much evidence that you can handle that with the kind of success that they have obviously built up. And so we'll see. I mean, obviously, I hope this gets resolved quickly because I obviously love them both. Tusker getting the party started with a $5 super chat. Thank you. I agree with the side of dry, the dry AP on this one. Yes. Well, it wouldn't be his dry AP. It would be his partners. I actually ran into Ben Shapiro at Disney World once. I didn't say hi to him.
Did you really?
I saw, Disneyland out in California. Walked past me with the family. So whatever floats their boat. Don't judge, but I come down on his side here. AstroTurf from bottom to top. I've worked with a few. Algo suspends. They make a call, but tell everyone that they were censored. Yeah, I mean, look, like Russell was saying, and thank you, Taya, for the $5. You'd have to go pretty far to the point where you would get demonetized through the Daily Wire, to the point where they would actually have to dock your pay for a prolonged period of time.
Right.
You might get suspended for a week, and then you might lose a little bit of ad revenue for the week, and maybe they'll dock your pay for that. There has to be some enforcement, right, on their part.
As I recall, if I understood it correctly, that didn't kick in unless they couldn't resolve it within 90 days.
Yeah, that's true. Well, because 90 days is, I think, the period where a strike disappears. So if you get a strike, then, if you're well behaved for 90 days, the strike goes away. So if we ever get a strike, everybody, we're going to be doing sports talk for the 90 days following the strike. We're not going to talk politics. We're just going to have to talk, we'll do movies, plays, art. That's what we'll do. We'll do art reviews. We'll show classic paintings and we'll talk about them in a very civilized way.
A retrospective.
Exactly. Until our strike expires. All right. That's all we got to say about those two, is it not?
I think so.
All right. So we have another segment that we're going to do right now. This is some New York politics, but this was a really interesting story that's been unfolding over the past number of days. So when New York Court of Appeals top judge Janet DeFiore resigned last summer, it created an opening that the governor of New York State, Kathy Hochul, freshly being after sworn into her first full term, is attempting to fill. She has to fill that seat on the highest court in the state. And her pick was a guy named Hector LaSalle, who is a right-leaning prosecutor with a conservative record on reproductive issues, labor issues, criminal justice issues. Hakeem Jeffries is helping rally support for him with Kathy Hochul. They did a couple of sort of town hall meetings and rallies on his behalf in New York City this past week. And so the New York sort of Democratic brass is going very hard for this guy. He was just shot down in the Senate Judiciary Committee 10-9. His nomination was defeated. Hochul is now trying to sue her own party, claiming that he did not get a fair committee hearing, and basically overriding the Judiciary Committee and bringing his nomination to a vote in the New York State Senate. So just like when they do a Supreme Court nomination nationally, the committee votes on whether or not to advance that nomination to the Senate floor. If a vote fails at the committee level, pardon me, then that nominee goes down. If they pass through that level, then the broader Senate votes. So the nomination is in trouble, but let's hear a little bit, or let's read a little bit rather, about Hector LaSalle's opinions on these three crucial issues to, yes, progressives, but also Democrats more broadly. This is from a recent article in Slate by Alex Salmon, who we actually had the pleasure of interviewing last year. Great writer and reporter. So this is a recent ruling of his. A decade ago, the New York AG launched an investigation into an anti-abortion crisis pregnancy center accused of practicing medicine without a license. In an extraordinary decision, LaSalle voted to shield the fake clinic from the probe. The ruling barred state investigators from reviewing advertisements and promotional literature, brochures, and pamphlets that the center provided or disseminated to the public on First Amendment grounds, even though these documents were critical to determining whether the clinic falsely promoted its services as genuine medical care. So that's one suspicious.
And you know, it was interesting, not to break the flow.
Sure, that's all right.
But in his hearings, he said it is really interesting and very typical of the way these people play to the friendly press, because you had a lot of press that was basically trying to pull the those leftists going after a good man kind of shit. And he said, no, I am pro-choice. That was just my ruling on this. I agreed with the issues there, but he doesn't explain why. Like, that ruling doesn't make any sense. You know, he didn't actually explain what his legal reasoning was, why he's pro-choice and yet ruled that way. Hey, I'm a free speech purist. I could appreciate a good First Amendment argument. There isn't one there.
Yeah, that's not right. Exactly.
That the whole thing. That's like saying you are suing a business for fraudulent advertising, but you cannot produce the advertising as evidence because that's impinging on their freedom of speech.
Right.
That's essentially what this ruling is. It's completely nonsensical. It makes no sense at all. The case is that they're practicing medicine without a license, and you can't look at what their claims were.
Right, of course.
That's the case.
Of course. It has nothing to do with First Amendment.
Right. Of course it doesn't.
Yeah.
First Amendment does not cover fraud.
Of course. If it did, there'd be no such thing as fraud.
George Santos would be doing great, right?
If it did, there'd be almost no such thing as fraud.
There would be.
It'd be impossible to prosecute fraud.
Right. It would be your freedom of speech to lie.
Right.
In your advertising.
Right. There'd be no SEC. Oh, I had the right to say that this stock was going to go through the roof next year, even though I knew it wasn't. What? It's freedom of speech. Well, I don't have to tell the truth. You know what I mean?
That's
all right.
Pretty much the whole business model of Standard & Poor's, as we discovered.
Yes, exactly. To prevent corporations from harassing unions, New York bars management from suing unions or union leaders in their official capacity. In 2015, however, LaSalle joined a shocking opinion that carved a massive loophole into this law. Here's interesting, Mr. Free Speech, allowing Cablevision to sue union leaders for criticizing the company's management response to Hurricane Sandy. The opinion rendered labor protections toothless, giving corporations an easy workaround until the Court of Appeals shut it down. So he didn't feel too strongly about the First Amendment there. Around? Yeah, right, exactly. Right. First Amendment concerns, not so much, right? Cablevision is allowed to sue union leaders for criticizing their management response.
And again, his defense typical Democratic Party bullshit. Oh, I came from a working class neighborhood. What the fuck does that have to do with anything? What does that have to do with anything? A lot of the most vicious, capitalist, fascist people I've ever met came from working class backgrounds because they get that Oprah attitude. Well, I did it.
If I did it, everybody could do it, right?
That's it. A lot of times, those are the most right-wing people you'll ever meet.
Exactly.
Not always, but often. That doesn't prove anything in and of itself. And whenever they go in that direction, they love to tell you that. Oh no, I came from work. My father was a mailman. They love to tell you that while they're refusing to raise the wages on their workers.
Right, exactly. All right, here's the third opinion that we're going to read here. And this one, I think, has a lot to do with why Hochul is fighting for him so hard. In a 2014 ruling, LaSalle voted to prohibit a criminal defendant from appealing his conviction. The defendant claimed he was the victim of an illegal search, yet prosecutors persuaded him to sign an ambiguous, misleading waiver of his right to appeal. A trial court judge failed to tell the defendant the actual impact, of this waiver. LaSalle thought that was fine, but the Court of Appeals later repudiated the decision, holding that a waiver of appeal can't mischaracterize what rights are waived. Now, this is where I think the rubber meets the road here, okay? People are wondering why Hochul is fighting so hard for this guy. They're like, is this just incompetence? Did she just not vet this pick enough? She didn't vet her lieutenant governor very well. He had to resign about 9 months after he took the job, which, by the way, is part of the reason why the Democrats lost that House seat in New York's 19th, because she had to recruit the sitting congressman from an incumbent spot, vacating that seat, right? But that, anyway, we can get to that in a moment. This is not an issue of vetting. I don't believe it's just incompetence. I don't believe it's a lack of preparation. I believe that a politician, when they do something because they see a benefit for themselves in it. I don't believe a politician makes a move unless they can see what potential benefit there is in it for them. Now, they don't always get it right? They don't always see into the future whether or not it's going to work out. But they always act with a plan. Okay, what's this going to get me? And I think this ruling is not about abortion. It's not about labor. It's about crime. Hochul won her governor's race by a measly 5 points. Democrats in New York State underperformed greatly in the midterms because of crime. And she is thinking she needs to put a tough-on-crime judge on the bench. And she knows that progressives are not going to be happy with that. So she's like, what if I make it a brown tough-on-crime judge? How about that? Maybe that'll have it both ways for me a bit. But I think that's what this is. I think the fact that he has a tough-on-crime record, that he's a prosecutor, is why she's pushing so hard. Because she won by a very narrow margin. Crime was a big issue that hurt her party very, very badly. And I think she wants to put a tough-on-crime judge on the bench. And this is how Democrats fuck up. This is how these issues get away from them and get away from their base. Because I don't think she's putting this guy on there because he's anti-choice. I think she's looking the other way because she needs a tough-on-crime pick. And so, yeah, that comes with these other opinions. But, whatever. Maybe that's down the road. Except now it's not down the road, because this would give conservatives a 4-3 majority on the highest court in the state at a time where there is no Roe versus Wade.
Okay, so...
And then what happens when you lose the governor's race by 3 points next time? Or what happens when there's a Republican president in a couple years and all of a sudden you don't have the court as this institutional safeguard against reactionary right-wing social policy coming down from on high? So I think it's just a very, very sleazy, opportunistic move. I think she's playing to a small slice of who she thinks of as persuadable voters in an anti-crime play. And I think she's just acting with very, very reckless disregard for the other consequences that come with putting this tough on crime right-wing agent on the court.
I agree. I think there's more to it as well, though. So the court in this 2-1 favoring Democrat state is conservative in the first place because you had Cuomo was running his little scheme there where you had these Democrats that would vote with the Republicans.
Yeah, but the
Now,
IDC, the
The
independent
IDC, most of them got voted out. I think all of them got voted out.
It was
what was that?
It was
2018?
disbanded basically. Enough of
that,
them
that was like
voted out
2018. They got whacked.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was this big mass wave where most of them got voted out. Now, if they put a genuine progressive in there, that's going to tilt the court in a progressive-ish direction. You know, you're still going to have conservatives on the court, so I wouldn't go so far as to say progressive, but it's going to tilt it overall to the left. They can't have that, man. New York is the most corrupt state in America. The last thing they want is for the next 14 years to have a court that's going to rule in a progressive direction on labor rights, that's going to rule in a progressive direction on corporate power, on neighborhood rezoning, redevelopment. They can't have that. They can't. Their donors can't have that. So yes, I agree with you. The crime is part of it, but I think it's bigger than that. New York is so corrupt. These politicians are so reliant on these big money donors that own them. What do you think those people are telling them? You better make sure this court doesn't tilt left.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's very, very possible as well. I still think there's a lot of room between a left nominee and this guy. Like, I think they could have done a little bit better. Like, if that was their game, they couldn't find some sleazy centrist Democrat judge in New York? I mean, New York is the home of sleazy centrist Democrats. Like, they couldn't do better than him. I think, this is a political pick because of that crime issue. And I think she thought that, and look, she's probably not wrong. I mean, she's taking heat for it.
I think the crime is part of it. But I think there's other things. Like, why did Hakeem Jeffries come down? That's not just crime. That's not just crime. That's money, man. Hakeem is all about the Benjamins.
Yeah,
He's all about his hedge funds.
It's interesting. That's a question no one's been able to really answer. I've read
That's
articles
part of
about
why
this.
I
I've
read
heard
it the way I
interviews
do.
about this. People cannot answer that. People chalk it up to, old habits dying hard. He's just a New York sort of power player. He backs what the party wants. But now these are different shoes that he's in now, man. I mean, he's the leader of the national party. So why are you going so hard for this guy? And why is Hochul still going so hard for this guy?
It's the donors. The donors want this guy. I'm not saying the crime's not part of it, but there's more to it.
Well, here's the other thing about this. This is an angle that I think is interesting. It was the New York State Democratic Party, and, we talk about the IDC, but the deference shown in the legislative body and by Cuomo himself to the right wing in New York is what led to conservative courts in the first place. It was a conservative court that rejected the initial redistricting map of New York State.
Yep.
And so they redrew the map, which we covered this very extensively because this affected not only the state, but it affected especially my neck of the woods, where you had districts 17, 18, and 19 get redrawn such that Maloney jumped ship. Now, if that asshole had not jumped ship, they probably would have survived this.
Right.
But the redistricting caused a situation where Maloney was able to justify vacating his district, the 18th, forcing Mondaire Jones out of the 17th, leaving open spots in 17th, 18th, and 19th. The Democrats ended up losing 2 out of those 3 seats in the midterms. They lost 4 seats overall in New York because of this redistricting by the conservative court.
Right.
Those 4 seats, by the way, are the difference between 218 and where they are now. So in AOC's video that we talked about last week, as much as almost everything she said in that video was wrong, the one thing she said in that video that was not wrong is that had it not been for New York losing 4 seats and Lauren Boebert winning her race, Republicans wouldn't have the House now. The Democrats would have the House. But 4 flips came in New York State. So it really was a red wave of sorts here in New York State, largely because of the maps handed down by these courts. And so when you put this kind of power in a conservative hand, not only does that undermine state politics, but in a situation like last year, as you saw, it could ruin your majority in the House nationally.
Right. Well, it's just kind of amazing that Hochul, given the advantage that Democrats have in the state, really squeaked through. What did she win by 5 points or something?
5.
Just 5 points.
Against the guy who your line was, he looks like the manager of a McDonald's when the milkshake machines broke, Lee Zeldin. Yeah, just perpetually panicked and aggrieved middle manager douchebag.
Yeah. To talk about suing, like, look, if this were the Republican Party and you got this kind of backlash from every quarter as soon as you announced this judge, they would have withdrawn the nomination.
Of course, you withdraw.
You withdraw. To so go out of your way to infuriate everybody. And this says everything. You have the unions, you have the NAACP. They were all against this guy. You know this forum? What's his name? What's the name of this judge?
Hector LaSalle.
LaSalle, that's what I thought. Latinos for LaSalle. Right. That's all they could come up with. All identity politics. That's it. They couldn't find somebody make it workers' party for LaSalle. They couldn't find anything like that. All they could produce was an identity politics appeal against the entire base of the party.
Well, that's what's so interesting about this. I mean, and this does give some credence to your theory that the donors want this guy and that they want to make sure they can keep the left in check in New York, because New York, is a state where left organizing has been successful in terms of state and local offices. DSA has actually done well in New York City and even in some places up here, even in my neck of the woods, right? And this may just be that they want to show strength. They want to show strength against the left. They want to show them that, no, you're not going to push us around. You block us at the committee level. This is New York, baby, right? We got ways of working around that, right? The New York State Democratic Party has a long history of being able to strong-arm people who are in its way, whether they're on the left or the right. And maybe that is what this is, because you're right. The smart political move here is to just scrap him and find somebody else, especially, like I said earlier, in New York State, where you must have an infinitely deep bench of corrupt asshole Democrats that you can call upon. Right. It's not like there's any shortage of those people here, right? You take a walk down the street, you'll find a corrupt fucking asshole Democrat who will serve on the court. Yeah, why not? Yeah, but so the level of defiance for that reason is kind of head scratching, and it makes you think that yes. And I've heard people say this, and it's an unfortunate thing. It's something that you can only speculate until you know more. But people have said, yeah, there's probably stuff going on behind the scenes that would explain much better why they're digging in so hard on getting this judge through, even after he's failed the first hurdle, which is a major hurdle, obviously.
Well, that's what I think. The money people want him. I've talked about this on the show before, but not for a while. Okay, so brief history. New York basically invented the American style of urban machine politics. And that was with Tammany Hall. And Tammany Hall basically perfected the system of corruption, graft, vice, pork barrel spending, and kickbacks that then spread to places like Chicago, which also became known for that, Boston, Detroit. All of these places kind of learned that at the feet of Tammany Hall. New York has never stopped having a lot of that Tammany Hall legacy. And one of the things that is most obvious from that history is the fact that in New York, you have got to register as a Democrat 6 months before the primaries to vote in a Democratic primary. That's how they make sure that non-anointed candidates cannot catch fire in New York State. There's no other reason to have such an onerous requirement to vote in the New York primary. The seat that AOC took over, actually, this is going to sound like it's a joke, but it's not. So the head of the Queens Democratic Party there, which was Joe Crowley at that time, you get to deal with probate. And that's a really sought after sinecure, because if a person dies intestate, once a certain number of years pass, you get 20% of the estate. Like literally that guy, the public official. I mean, that's like something from Roman times, right? A public official would get a piece of the estate for processing it. That is the legacy of Tammany Hall in New York State. Like statistically, I'm not just saying, this isn't just hyperbole. New York is the most corrupt state in America based on the number of our politicians that are prosecuted and convicted. Like Cuomo, he got taken down on sexual harassment. That can be anywhere. But if you look at what Cuomo was really guilty of, aside from that, the political things that he was guilty of, classic New York stuff. His brother being able to get COVID tests when nobody else could, having the state troopers bring them, having his staff work on his $5 million memoir, and particularly taking money from the hospital lobby and then slipping into the bill that they wouldn't have any COVID liability for the nursing home deaths. That's classic. Andrew Cuomo was in a long tradition of deeply corrupt New York governors. Hochul is very much in that tradition. Hakeem Jeffries is in that tradition.
She's in that tradition, but she's no Cuomo. Cuomo is a legacy guy.
Sure. Well,
right?
sure.
So Hochul is in that tradition. Maybe that's why she's having a hard time getting him through, because she's a noob, right?
Right. Yeah.
You know, she doesn't carry the weight that obviously
sure.
the Cuomo name in New York is, big. You know, and so maybe she just doesn't have the kind of clout.
She doesn't.
Push
she doesn't.
Through.
Sure,
maybe that's why she
doesn't. But also the composition of the legislature has changed because they got rid of all those IAC guys.
Right. Exactly.
So she's dealing with a different bunch of people. If the IAC were still there, she would have gotten them through.
Oh yeah, would have gotten them through. No problem. No doubt about that. All right, let's do some super chats before we do Davos here. Zach Boyles, Shapiro's work on shark tits was breathtaking. Well, thank you for the $1.99. You know, you got some references there, Mr. Boyles.
Yeah, I don't even know what that is.
I don't know. I don't know if that's
was that a Shark Week thing on Discovery Channel?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure, but thank you for the donation.
Right, we got right here off the coast. We see the infamous shark tits.
Lloyd Blackwell, thank you for the $2. Lloyd, New York becoming a purple state? ? Well, you know, we've talked about this in the past before, how New York is really a red state with New York City in it. Aside from New York City, most of New York is red. And when you have an issue like crime really get out of control in the city, which is the blue center, that makes the city more purple than it usually is. Not that it's purple. Obviously New York City still went blue overwhelmingly, but not as overwhelmingly as it used to. That combined with a year where Republicans are just generally across the board more motivated to turn out, that equals a competitive race statewide. And that's why this was a competitive race statewide. Now, was it competitive enough for the Republicans to flip it? No. But the fact that you had a Republican, what was supposed to be a Republican wave year, but not quite, it didn't quite manifest that way nationally. But it was a Republican year in the sense that they were still more motivated at the end of the day to turn out. That's why Republicans won the House. That combined with issues in blue places that favor red politics made it a little bit closer than perhaps it should have been. And, this is why, people who want to chalk up Democrats' failures in New York simply to the redistricting are not telling the whole story. Yes, the redistricting was obviously part of it. Those races were close enough to the point where you could say that, but for Maloney jumping ship, they probably would have won all 3 of those Hudson Valley races instead of losing 2 out of 3. And yeah, but for the redistricting, they probably would have won them. But also, you can't deny the macro dynamics when you have statewide returns come in as close as they did, because districts don't matter in a statewide race. It's a statewide race. And the fact that statewide it was that close between Hochul and Zeldin definitely signaled that New York was more purple this time than perhaps it was expected to be, and perhaps than it should have been. Cool Blue, thank you for the $4.99. Appreciate it. All right, those super chat fingers are warming up. Thank you, everybody. 2018 Cuomo won re-election by 1.4 million votes. 2022 Hochul won by 400,000. This dramatic shift is partly why ours gained in New York House seats. Sure, absolutely.
Okay, once in a while, New York elects a governor that's just kind of almost invisible. Hochul is one of those. It's like Pataki. Like, who was Pataki? Who the fuck was that guy?
And how did he
mean?
Mario
Like
Cuomo?
you hardly noticed that he was there.
Yeah.
And he did 2 terms.
Mm-hmm.
And you hardly noticed Pataki. To this day, I could not tell you one thing that Pataki did. I don't think most people could. Hochul's shaping up to be one of those. She's there. She happened to be there. She's a legacy. I get it. They decided not to run anyone against her. So in the Trump era, New York just was not going to elect, especially Lee Zeldin. I mean,
Right.
if you had a credible Republican challenger, I mean, when you look at how close it is, if you had a talented challenger, who knows? Maybe they could have flipped the state. But that guy wasn't going to flip the state. You see, the Republican Party is used to not really trying to win.
Right.
So I think they didn't really think through who they might run against her, who could beat her.
Right. I mean, you don't run a good farm system in a league where you're not going to be able to compete 99 out of 100 times anyway.
Right.
Right. All right. A long story short, to be fair, Long Island would have only went blue if insanely gerrymandered map went through. Yeah, I'm not sure. There's only so many ways to gerrymander a Long Island. You know what I mean? Yeah. I mean, they can't carve out the, they can't put the water in the district. They tried to take pieces of AOC's district down to Long Island's. Look, there was no way in a year like this, especially, that I saw Long Island going blue. And that's where Santos won. Santos representing the great Long Island. Who do you got? Taya with a $10 super sticker. Thank you, Taya. Thank you guys for coming through.
Taya's putting you guys to shame. Come on.
And Taya's a patron too.
And she's a patron.
Taya's really coming through for us. Thank you so much. All right, let's do our final segment of the evening, shall we? This is kind of an epic one. We have a lot of materials to present here. But
we have some exclusive footage from Davos.
Oh yes, before we get to that.
We have an exclusive. This was actually, I think, shot by Aaron Mate on the sly. But it's really shocking.
The people are revolting.
You said it. They stink on ice.
There it is.
Oh, Your Majesty, this is a very serious.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's I'm amazed that he got that shot. That of course is the founder of Davos there, Kurt Schrader.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. Really putting on a show for everybody. The World Economic Forum at Davos is actually wrapping up tomorrow. We were not able to make it this year. We our invite must have got lost in the mail.
We wanted to show solidarity with Elon and turn down our invitation as well.
Oh, is that right? Oh, yeah. So you got one. See, they didn't even invite me. Russell abstained on principle. I just didn't get an invite.
Well, everyone knows I'm the class of the operation.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah.
Like they can't invite people who don't know which fork to use.
Those black tie. Yeah, right. Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Where
It's
to
very
put the
embarrassing.
forks. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And so the last day of the World Economic Forum is tomorrow, January 20th. For those watching this as a clip segment, we're recording this on the 19th. But they put out some sort of press materials here, some videos that, you know, sort of reflect the sort of ethos of the World Economic Forum and what they're going to be doing there. And this was a video that made the rounds online. 8 predictions for the world in 2030, according to the World Economic Forum. So this is, I think, a good way to set up what this conference was about this year. Number 1.
He's very happy. Yeah.
Whatever you want, you'll rent, and it'll be delivered by drone.
Wow, that sounds great.
That sounds great. Everything you get will be delivered by drone, and it'll be a rental. What does that mean? You're gonna have to return it?
Yeah,
This sounds like a huge hassle.
Well, yeah. If you once you lose your minimum wage job, they're gonna come and take your furniture.
So what do? You put it back on the porch, and the drone comes and picks it back up?
I guess so.
What if your cat gets
if you get poor enough, the drone comes for you.
Well, what if the drone takes your dog or your cat away by accident? What if a cat comes up to the door and is, you know, sniffing to get in, and a drone swoops by to take your Xbox back after a 30-day rental, and it takes your pet away? Did they think of that?
Well, this sounds like a Disney pitch if I've ever heard one. We should talk to our agent.
Yeah, exactly. Number 2, the U.S. won't be the world's leading superpower. A handful of countries will dominate.
That's probably
You won't
true.
die waiting for an organ donor. Oh, that's good.
Oh, that sounds good. Do you rent it?
We won't rent it.
Do they take it back if you can't
They
pay?
print organs. Oh, and you'll eat less meat.
Yeah.
An occasional treat, not a staple, for the good of the environment.
Apparently, we're going over to crickets, according to them.
Yeah. 1 billion people will be displaced by climate change. That's not good. We'll have to do a better job at welcoming and integrating refugees.
I mean, it keeps wages down.
Polluters will have to pay to emit carbon dioxide.
Yeah, the Chinese are never doing that.
A global price on carbon. Oh, wow. Mars. Oh,
okay. Can we get away from you assholes that way? Because then I'll consider it.
Western values will have been tested to the breaking point. Checks and balances that underpin our democracies must not be forgotten.
No, this is the same Klaus Schrader who praised the Chinese for their system.
Like, comment, and share.
It's a little funny.
Alrighty, sir. So take it away. This obviously went viral online for reasons that I'm sure you can imagine. We have a few other exhibits to get to, but I'm going to let Russell quarterback this while I prep those.
Okay, this is something I have noticed even among the actual left YouTubers. Davos is really not given as much attention as it should be. Mostly the populist right talks a lot about this, and that video, that's not produced for this year's Davos. That I think they produced that for the 2018 Davos.
But that went viral this time around.
That went viral. Well, it's been viral ever since. The populist right, you will own nothing and be happy, like that for them is almost like the Great Reset. You know, it's one of those things that really symbolizes the vision of the world. And look, it is a creepy dystopian vision, and it tells you how out of touch these people are that they would put that in a video with this guy smiling as if that's going to be well received by the peasants. How out of touch do you have to be to think that people are going to see that and go, wow, I'll own nothing and I'll be happy. I'll be renting everything. Oh, that's so cool. Did you hear what they said at Davos?
Right. Most people are like, I already own nothing and I'm not happy.
How much more happy could I
Yeah,
get?
right. Exactly. How much happier can I get? How much less can I own?
My whole living room already came out of Rent-A-Center.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
I'm already there. So Kurt Schrader started this in 1971 as a kind of business meeting, and this was pretty typical kind of. There are a lot of conferences like that. To make his get together of elites unique, he is one of the architects of the neoliberal vision of the world. This whole idea that Anand Giridharadas talks about of stakeholder capitalism, this whole vision that private industry rather than government through business is going to solve the world's problems. You could definitely make the case that Kurt Schrader has had more to do with articulating that vision.
You talking about Kurt Schrader? You talking about Kurt Schrader or Klaus Schwab?
Isn't his name Kurt Schrader? The guy? Oh, Klaus Schwab. Yeah.
Yeah, he's the founder of it. Yeah.
The founder, yes.
Yeah.
You could argue that he has had more to do with disseminating that vision around the world than any other single person. And this is where the populist right is out in front, I think, of where a lot of the left is. And historically, that was not the case. We were talking about this on the show the other day. What was it? Seattle, 1999. It was all leftist protesters against the WTO meeting in Seattle. The left used to be on top of this before they got completely co-opted and brainwashed by the corporate media, the Democratic Party, supporting this kind of thing. If you watch, I remember when I was a corporate media junkie, like the way CNN and MSNBC covered Davos, it's like they're covering the Academy Awards. It's that same breathless, glowing, admiring tone. Let's see who's at Davos this year. Oh, we have just spotted the German prime minister talking with Elon Musk, back when they liked him. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that what Davos is all about? These business, isn't it just amazing seeing everyone coming together to try to solve the world's problems? I mean, they just cheerlead the whole thing. Absolutely no irony. No skepticism about it at all. So now it's really been left to the populist right to articulate what the left used to articulate, that this is an unelected global elite that you cannot simply dismiss, because if you look at how much impact their ideas have had, you can't say, well, this is just a bunch of rich people talking. No, it's not. No, it's not. And we actually have a video of him talking about people who have gone through their Young Global Leaders Initiative, and it's half the leaders in the Western world and some in the not Western world. So I'm gonna play that. I have that one.
When you brought the Young Global Leaders Program here for executive education and the Schwab Fellows, but there are two countries in the world now in which the Young Global Leaders have emerged. Tell us just a bit about that in terms of the governance.
Yes, actually, this notion to integrate young leaders is part of the World Economic Forum since many years. And I have to say, when I mention our names like Mrs. Merkel, even Vladimir Putin and so on, they all have been young global leaders of the World Economic Forum. But what we are very proud of now is the young generation, like Prime Minister Trudeau, President of Argentina, and so on, that we penetrate the cabinets. So yesterday I was at a reception for Prime Minister Trudeau, and I know that half of this cabinet, or even more half of this cabinet, are for our actually young global leaders of the world.
And that's true in Argentina too. Wow. Yeah. Sorry. That's true in Argentina as well.
It's true in Argentina, and it's true in France now.
France, yes, we run the world.
Global leader, but
I mean, really, this guy is auditioning for the part of a Bond villain.
And we have established.
Okay. So that's basically the upshot of it. Nicolas Sarkozy went through that program. Viktor Orban. So did Elon Musk, actually. And that's part of what's interesting about this too. Like, people from all ideological stripes have intersected through this program. And he's bragging as if there's nothing creepy about this at all. Oh, yes, all these leaders in Canada,
right.
yes, half the cabinet, and in France now too. Like, okay, this is what you're looking at. They are our modern day aristocracy in the true sense. If you go back and you look at speeches of the aristocracy, they saw themselves as being benevolent, right? They saw them, and so to my subjects, I have a love in my heart that is greater than you can know, right? That's how they see themselves. They see themselves as a global, as an elite class,
Right.
that are going to rescue the peasants from their folly and their foolishness and their material deprivations. And just like the monarchs of old, just like the aristocrats of old, they never ask whether the very system that they benefit from is the real problem of those peasants, that their parasitic relationship to those peasants is in and of itself the problem. In fact, and this extends to their perplexity at the fact that the public has lost faith in institutions, right? The only reason you could possibly have lost faith in institutions is disinformation. This is why they're so obsessed now with censorship, with social media. The peasants are revolting, and they can't imagine that it's because they have done a terrible job and they should be deposed. Just like the aristocracy couldn't imagine that, they can't imagine that. So we have that clip, right?
Yeah, so this is a video of Brian Stelter's panel on the dangers of disinformation, and one of the people on that panel was A.G. Sulzberger from the New York Times. So here he is, going on for a couple minutes here. We'll play the whole thing through because I think it's worth watching, on the dangers of the wrong ideas getting in the wrong people's heads at the wrong time.
Of disinformation, I think it maps basically to.
Sorry, I'm going to play this one more time through.
This question of disinformation, I think it maps basically to every other major challenge that we are grappling with as a society, and particularly the most existential among them. So disinformation and the broader set of misinformation, conspiracy, propaganda, clickbait, the broader mix of bad information that's corrupting the information ecosystem. What it attacks is trust. And once you see trust decline, what you then see is societies start to fracture. And so you see people fracture along tribal lines, and that immediately undermines pluralism. Mm-hmm. And, the undermining of pluralism is probably the most dangerous thing that can happen to a democracy. So I think if you're spending this week thinking about the health of democracies and democratic erosion, I think it's really important to work your way back up to where this starts.
And the term fake news and then disinformation, it was popularized 6 years ago at this point. Where are we today versus then?
What do you mean, where are we today versus then?
So this was a hot, popular topic. Yeah. There was an awakening about it. The social networks felt pressure. But now where are we? And the same question for Jeannie, but where are we today?
I see. Yeah, it's a great,
I see.
And
to
be clear, actually,
terrible
terms
interviewer.
like fake news and enemies of the people have been popularized cyclically in society and in some of the most, repressive and dangerous moments, Nazi Germany, Stalinist Russia, right? So I think anytime we're hearing language like that applied to, a free press, or more broadly free expression, I think we should be really worried. Look, I think that there's no doubt that society seems to have at some level accepted how much the information ecosystem has been poisoned. And I think it's going to require real sustained effort from the platforms, from political leaders, from business leaders, and from consumers themselves to reject that.
Yeah, no, I think that's 100% true. You know, like when Alex Jones wrote on the front page of his widely circulated newspaper that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq and we had to go in. You know, I think that's a great point he makes.
And actually wrote an op-ed saying anyone who didn't believe it at this point must be insane.
Yeah, he also ran a trade paper back in the 90s that promised that NAFTA was going to bring jobs to the Midwest. Not take jobs from the Midwest, you know, all that fake news out there. You know, it's up to consumers.
It was also what was he saying? The day of the election, 90% chance that Hillary Clinton was going to be the president.
Yeah, that was
Alex Jones, right?
Yeah, he has a blog. Yeah, that made those kinds. Yeah, exactly. So I think he makes a really good point there. It never occurs to people that the reason why fake news flourishes is because real news loses credibility. Like the quote unquote real news
is fake news,
becomes faker. And by the way, this is just a point that I have to drive home. I've said this over and over again, but this is a truly Orwellian thing where Trump became known as the guy to call CNN fake news, call the New York Times fake news. Fake news was popularized in this culture, as Stelter says there, about 6 years ago during the 2016 campaign. The first people to use the terms fake news were not from the Trump campaign. They were from the Clinton campaign, and they used fake news to describe outlets like InfoWars.
Right.
So they were the ones who threw that first stone out there. You are fake news. She gave a whole speech about it.
Right.
She gave a whole speech where she called out Jones. She mentioned, she went on and on about him for 5 or 6 minutes. And there was a Clinton campaign that said fake news is a danger. Right. And then the Trump really brought that into the popular lexicon by mocking them after the vote had happened, because his campaign manager said famously at that Harvard post-election forum, she says, turns out the only fake news all along was that Trump had no chance to win.
Right.
But that's how that started.
Right. Now, at Davos, okay, so the popular, we're actually going to do a patrons-only segment on this. At Davos, they talk a lot about global warming and climate change. And as left people, our critique of that is going to tend to be, well, but they don't really mean it. They're not going to rein in these oil. That was Greta Thunberg's criticism. She went to Davos and excoriated them, as you would expect, for not doing enough. And okay, fair enough. There was a comedian who went to an Oxford Union debate, and we are going to do a segment on this for patrons only.
So sign up.
So sign up. But he made a very interesting case. This debate. It's kind of like woke versus anti-woke or something like that. And he said, okay, about climate change, assuming that I agree with you about everything. Let's just start there. I agree with all of your premises about climate change. England, obviously we're Americans. We represent more carbon output than England does, but okay, the point still stands. England could sink into the sea tomorrow. It's not going to make a difference. We only put out 2% of the world's carbon emissions. Most of those carbon emissions are coming out of China and Latin America. And those people are poor. And you're not going to convince them that their children need to starve because of global warming. And if you're a parent, he talks about he's a parent, it's a no-brainer. Would you rather your child grow up well-nourished and go to be a woke idiot at Oxford if that means that they're going to every day of their life send up a plume of CO2, or they're going to starve and live in malnutrition? There's not a parent in the world that is not going to choose the former. Right. So this is not a problem that you can solve by throwing soup on campuses. Now, the populist right, they're skeptical about the climate change to begin with. But their view of Davos is not necessarily incorrect, that you have this global elite that all arrive in their private jets. I believe the emissions from their jets were up 20% this year. And they're going to tell you you have to eat bugs. They're going to tell you you can't eat a hamburger.
Exactly. And this is not just like do as I say, but not as I do optics. Like, it's not just a matter of bad optics. Like, I forget the exact percentage, but like the richest 1% of human beings have a carbon footprint that is just like way
Of course
out of
they do.
proportion with everybody else for obvious reasons, right? And so it's not just symbolic. Like, this is a reflection of how these people actually live and how they consume. Ultimately, this is going to be about consumption, right? So the right-wing version of this is to maybe pretend that there is not an environmental crisis going on and that there is not a sort of habitability crisis just around the corner. The left version of this is basically the Planet of the Humans movie, that came out a few years ago. And that's why I love that movie so much. At one point, the director, Jeff Gibbs, has a monologue. He's talking to a philosophy teacher, and he says, every civilization has a sort of immortality myth, right? Is the green movement our sort of immortality myth? Is it something we tell ourselves to delude us into thinking that we're going to be here forever as a species? Because what Russell's saying is right. Like, the only way to get these under control seems to be to doom large populations to eternal poverty and misery and deprivation. Are they going to go for that? No. Should they go for that? No, not if you're them, right? Put yourself in their shoes. Is this problem solvable, or is our demise as a species inevitable? Is it inescapable? And is that okay? Right? I mean, that's the philosophical question at the heart of that movie. Is like, is the green movement going to save us? And if not, how do we feel about that? At what point do we just reckon with the age-old historical and scientific fact that not every species lives forever? Species die. And if we become too big a burden on the planet will have its way of fixing itself, of healing itself. And if that means getting rid of us, then that's what it will do. Now, maybe, there were some people who thought that movie was a bit nihilistic in its pessimism about the prospects of innovation solving this and saving us.
Well, and that's where the comedian went with this. He
that's fair
ultimately
enough,
said,
but I think the
you
point
have to
is,
put your focus on inventing your way out of this because it's the only way.
Fair enough. But I think philosophically,
if there's a chance, that's the only one.
Yes, but there's a great chance that will fail. And if that fails, then we as a species are not long for this world. And maybe that's okay. Like, maybe that's not something we should be alarmed about. Maybe that's just the natural, like, species come into the world, species leave. You know what I mean? If the only solution is this is not a solution at all because of what you just said. It becomes a consumption problem. And the only way to solve a consumption problem is with less consumption. And if that means,
or you need to invent technology
or you throw the Hail Mary pass, which I'm not saying that's not worth throwing, but I'm saying it's worth thinking about from that other perspective as well.
Well, that's what George Carlin said in one of his.
Oh yeah, the planet is fine. The people are fucked. The planet's going to be fine. You're not saving the planet.
The planet's going to shake us off like a tick.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
So that is worth
talk about
remembering.
Black pill. See,
because we are going to look at Davos and the left critique is going to be the hypocrisy of it, but the right critique is valid as well. The right critique is this is another effort by global elites to control us to no good purpose. Now, they might believe that it's to no good purpose because there is no climate change, but it doesn't really matter. They're not wrong on the whole. that going and telling people how much they can drive and what they can eat doesn't make a shit bit of difference, especially when it's coming from a class where this is, look, I mean, Davos is made up of 1%ers. These people last year generated almost as much wealth as the rest of the planet. 99% of people generated a little more wealth than 1% of the planet, and these people are going to tell you you need to get used to cricket burgers.
You're right. Yeah, exactly.
Are they going to be eating cricket burgers? I don't think so.
That's where a lot of this culture war stuff comes from. That's why people see it as this act of defiance to eat red meat. You know, you see these conservative lunatics out there at the barbecue, you know, taking selfies of them grilling a steak, acting like it is this act of rebellion. That's where it comes from.
Right.
That's where they come from. They're sticking it in the eye of these people who are telling us, no, actually bugs are going to be the new norm, not cow meat.
Right. And that's why I think this is something a lot of people on the left are not exposed to. They don't hear these arguments. They don't know what this conversation is. But you know what? This conversation has a lot more adherents than people who feel that we should eat crickets. Okay. I mean, that does, and this point of view is only going to become more and more popular.
Yeah. And who's winning? Who's winning? That was another point that Michael Moore said when he was going and making the rounds for that movie. He says, you look at most social movements and there's been progress. There's been real progress, right? Look at a movement like the civil rights movement, right? It's made tangible progress. Doesn't mean we are where we need to be in terms of civil rights here, but you can look from where it started to where it is now, and you can point to actual progress being made. You can say we're better off now than we were on the day the civil rights movement was founded. You can't say that about the environment. You can't say that about the green movement. We are unmistakably and unequivocally in a much worse place now than we were on the first Earth Day. What does that say about the trajectory of the movement? What does that say about the goals of the movement, about the ideas, about the approach? That we are in a worse place environmentally than we were 50 years ago when the green movement really took shape in a way that's, you know, recognized. I mean, yes, there's always been environmental activism, but in a way that resembles what it is now. This is half a century already. And what do we have to show for it? Nothing. Worse than nothing.
Well, and this is where Planet of the Humans made a valid point. I mean, we debated this at the time, because they got some facts wrong. And I felt like if you're going to go out on this much of a limb, you can't give your critics that line
Russell
of attack.
thought there should have been title cards to make the dates clearer, which upon a second viewing, I really don't think was that necessary. But anyway, go ahead.
I feel they opened themselves up to attack, and that allowed distraction from the message of the movie.
I should have offered to recut that movie with titles. I didn't have to change any frames. I just put titles in. Would have made you happy.
Our civilization is dependent on cheap energy. You can't talk about changing our energy consumption without talking about completely changing our civilization. And the only way that you can get out of that is to invent your way out of it, if it's possible. So arguing, forget about all this recycling, forget it. Just forget it. Focus the entire energy of the society on a true Green New Deal. On maybe a better way to put it is a green moonshot, right? We have to, within 10 years, have functioning carbon scrubbers that are energy efficient, that are going to take this carbon out of the atmosphere. That is probably a more worthwhile focus of all of that global energy than trying to approach it with conservation. That's just not going to work.
Right.
Because
reusable shopping bags that you forget every time you have to buy spend $1 on another one.
Right. I mean, that's like a religious ritual. It makes you feel virtuous, but it's not doing anything. It's not doing anything for the planet, because what the comedian said is right. You're not going to get these poor countries that now are getting their turn to try to become a middle class country, to now say, oh, well, you guys got yours, but fuck us, right? No, they're not going to agree to that.
Right.
So your only option is to invent your way out of it. And it doesn't mean it can be done, but that would actually solve the problem. And you're just not going to solve it any other way. So what choice do you have? And that is something that, look, you got this populist right hating this Davos elite with their, you're going to rent things and not own anything, and you're going to be happy with their creepy dystopian aristocratic bullshit. You know, you get into that can do, you might get them on board. You'll get a certain number of them on board because they like that talk. They like that classic American moonshot. Yeah, we're going to do it. We're going to solve this problem. You're going to get them. You're going to win a lot more of them over than you are with this. You need to drive a Prius. That's not going to work.
Right. Exactly. All right, we got a couple more exhibits, but I do want to make sure we keep track of the super chats here. Zach says it was renamed to Starboat for YouTube plus F the WEF. The Starboat reference is probably from back in the chat, but F the WEF.
Shark Tits?
Oh, Shark Tits was renamed to Starboat. Okay, well, thank you, Zach. I appreciate that. Virtuoso, I got a prediction for 2030. Salt Lake City will be renamed to Salt Puddle City. All right, that's a good one. We'll put that in the bank, Virtuoso. Thank you for the donation, my friend. Climate change displaced equals siege warfare and sanctions. Yeah, look, I mean, that's kind of what we're talking about. You know, I mean, these what seem to be very benign, you know, green messaging. A lot of people are suspicious of these for those reasons. Hey, Extra Bulla gave you $2 for your Indian adventure. Thank you, Extra Bulla. We appreciate that. All right, we're all super chat. Were we all caught up? Nope.
I am gonna for that. I'm gonna give $2 to a beggar, and I'm gonna tell him it came from Extra Bulla.
It came from Extra Bulla in Fort Greene. Red Z, $5. Thank you, Red Z. Davos is like second act location for a James Bond movie. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Meets henchwoman, scores, and pisses off villain. Who's our James Bond? Bono. Yeah, right, exactly.
Not Bono.
That's a good super chat. That's a good super chat. I like that one. That was very clever. All right.
Well, Money Penny.
Yeah, exactly.
We have to do something about these cricket burgers.
Cricket burgers, exactly. All right, we got a couple more clips that we want to play from Davos. We mentioned NAFTA in passing, so while we're on this topic, I feel like we should have a listen in on Delaware Senator Chris Coons talking about, yes, the price of free trade, but why we will continue to pursue free trade regardless of the price. And this, I mean, this conversation, this little snippet, I mean, if this is not exhibit A for why Trump was able to flip those Rust Belt states, I don't know what is, because not only is it hammer on the trade message, but it hammers on the more transcendent idea that there are unaccountable and unelected bureaucrats making these decisions for us when we want a representative from our country to make these calls for us. Let's take a look.
Managing director of IMF is saying here that a bit of nearshoring to avoid this notion of just in time and a little bit more just in case, building a little bit resilience is fine. But if we go too much into this notion of friendshoring or more protectionist measures, we can shave off a lot of growth globally. We know that there is a new House. There is also partly a new Senate. How far will the U.S. go in friendshoring, making sure that things goes to Mexico and countries that you're
friendshoring. That's my favorite term of this conference. Friendshoring. Friendshoring, not outsourcing. Friendshoring.
Yes.
Friendshoring.
It's okay because we are all friends here, Mr. Bond.
Friends. Everybody catch that? We're going to friend shore production to Mexico, not offshore or outsource, friend shore.
There's like we stumbled into the monologue where the villain explains his plot.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Like all we need is Sean Connery strapped to a table, a laser working its way up towards his garage.
Exactly.
In countries that you're allied with, do you see the point of the IMF managing director, and how will the U.S. balance this to make sure that we also will have growth in the years to come, and this will be a very shallow recession, if a recession at all?
Look, thank you for your comments and the opportunity. I do think that American leaders and business leaders in particular recognize that the severe disruptions of the pandemic and some of the challenges of the reach and the scope of globalization that have caused a backlash in many of our countries, a populist backlash, certainly in the United States, need to be addressed. One of the ways to deal with some of our challenges in terms of the hemisphere and migration also is to do some nearshoring to improve the job opportunities in Central America, for example. But I don't think it will be as robust as potentially projected. I do think that we will continue to have an open economy, to be committed to free trade, and to see the robust value that globalization has brought to the world as well as to many of our people. This is a delicate
Many of our
point.
people who don't live in Ohio,
It is unclear where
Michigan,
a divided
Wisconsin,
Congress
Pennsylvania.
might go in trade policy. But I do think there's been a lot of comment, a lot of concern about the Inflation Reduction Act, one of the largest pieces of legislation that a divided Senate just passed. A 50-50 Senate managed to do some robust things, invest in our own infrastructure, invest in our own science research, and invest in our own.
All right. So there you have that. There you have that. It's benefited many of our own people in Lower Manhattan, in San Francisco, in Austin, Texas, in Silicon Valley,
Yeah, we can
parts
get
of
cheap.
Chicago.
Yeah. I can go right to the 99-cent store. I had to replace these. You know, it's nice to
Exactly.
get them for $10. You know?
Exactly.
I try not to think too much about the chain of custody and how those got to me for $10. But
right,
I try not to think about that. They will. It's interesting because you have this Davos elite. This really does demonstrate why Trump got elected, because Trump didn't talk this shit. You've got this European faction saying, well, America, you can't back out of this global system. You got to keep buying from your friends. You got to keep friendshoring. And Trump came along and said, fuck that shit.
Right.
We're gonna manufacture here. Not that he did it. But okay, this is something I will say their messaging needs to be better, because you always have Democrats never understand how loathsome they are. If you ever notice, they always blame their unpopularity on bad messaging. But this really is bad messaging. I don't think most people understand how much the Inflation Reduction Act does put into rebuilding some of the manufacturing capacity of the United States, particularly in regards to computer chips, which, if that's not a national security issue, what is? Not having the capacity to make computer chips, the thing that the entire modern economy is dependent on. If that's not a security risk, what is a security risk? Of course you need the capacity to manufacture that. And it takes years to build one of these manufacturing plants, so you better get started yesterday if you want one. And we're completely dependent on getting these from like Taiwan, like one of the only places in the world that makes the most advanced, most in-demand chips is a company called Taiwan Semiconductor Corporation. I think that's what it's called. Like, that plant is so important. That's a point that always comes up in trying to figure out if China would invade Taiwan, because the question is, would they risk that? Because they need those chips too. would they risk damaging that plant? Like, it's believed that might be one of the reasons China has not invaded Taiwan. Right. So, okay, you've got this country, nominally a country, that is in conflict with China, which China could invade at any time. And we're dependent on that for these computer chips that are vital to our technology and our economy. We shouldn't be building computer chip factories here. So this is something that Trump, this was part of his popularity, that the libs, look, even if you hate him, even if you want to beat him, you have to honestly understand what somebody's appeal is. Like, you can't just deny it. You can't just say it's all white supremacy, because you'll never beat them that way, because you're not really addressing the underlying cause of his popularity. White supremacists have been voting Republican since 1964 and the passage of the Civil Rights Act. They didn't all of a sudden discover the Republican Party when Donald Trump started running. That is not what made him the president. What made him the president were issues like this. Him telling the NATO countries to cough up the money. Now, the part that Trump didn't understand or didn't care about is the reason we don't make the NATO countries pay up is so that we'll have control, so that we'll have influence.
Right, of course. Right.
That's he didn't care about that part, or he didn't get it.
Look, the offense of watching a senator that you voted for to do your bidding, to represent you as a working class person in the Rust Belt, or outside the Rust Belt. Obviously, these kind of voters were concentrated in the Rust Belt, which is why Trump won. The offense of watching him sit on this overseas panel at this lavish conference and talk about the obligations and responsibilities that we have to our friends and our allies, while your community at home has just been so degraded over the past several decades. Of course. I mean, that clip there is Exhibit A for why Trump won.
Right. Of course.
Because these people don't see themselves. Chris Coons, there on that, in that seat there, is not acting as a representative for his people in his state. He is acting as an arbiter of a global economic system.
Exactly.
And that's the
and
difference.
You can see it in his body language, like he's reassuring them, no, don't worry, we're on board with the whole globalist neoliberal project.
Exactly.
Don't worry, we're not. Yeah, we're building some computer chip plants, but just putting money into our own infrastructure. Right. So
credit
that
card companies in my state are fine with globalization.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's as good a clip when Ron DeSantis is the president and people say, how could that have happened? Show them that clip.
Yeah, exactly.
Although, I mean, that's an open question, because as far as Ron DeSantis has really gone after the culture war stuff. If he's smart, he's going to pick up the Trump anti-globalization mantle.
I believe he had a word to say about Davos. I don't have a clip for it, but I believe I saw something about that. Maybe we'll pick up on that for the Sunday night show. Maybe we'll find that. But we have one more Davos clip to play before. This is back to Stelter's disinformation panel. This is about the potential arrival of hate speech laws being brought to the United States. This is European Commission VP Vera Jourova. I hope I'm saying her name right. A little snippet from her segment on the Brian Stelter panel.
Well, we need the people who understand the language and the case law in the country. Because what qualifies as hate speech, as illegal hate speech, which you will have soon also in the U.S. I think that we have a strong reason.
She's tapping the knee of Congressman Seth Moulton there. That's who she's talking about. So she's saying you'll have, because there are no hate speech laws on the books in the U.S. Hate speech is a social creation here in the U.S. But in Europe, in several countries, they actually have laws on the books forbidding quote unquote hate speech.
Why we have this in the criminal law, we need the platforms to simply work with the language and to identify such cases. The AI would be too dangerous.
Well,
so there you have it.
That Babylon Bee segment was prophetic.
Yeah, right, exactly.
There's for we have somebody here who takes exception to the idea that lost adult that Taiwan semiconductors chips are so important. So that's the link I'm sharing. You can look into that. Oh. So go on.
Interesting. No. I mean, look, that was part of that panel on misinformation and in speech and on social media companies' obligation to sort of, clamp down on the dissemination of information and of speech. And look, obviously, as Elon said when he took over, we're going to sort of try and live by the standard of if it's legal, it is permissible on our site. Now, obviously, that runs into a problem in countries where there are actual laws on the books against hate speech, because if you're going to operate in country X and country X has laws about what you can and cannot say that go further than our laws do, then obviously you have to play by their rules to operate in their nations. But the warning there, that was the eerie part of that. Like, how do you know that these regulations are coming here? Because Davos, has a history of making predictions, as we saw at the top of this. And some of those predictions have come eerily true. There's one in particular that we are really not even going to touch on this channel. Maybe we'll do that on Rumble or on Substack. But maybe that'll be a teaser. Maybe that'll be that will be a patron segment.
That was about. I know exactly what you're talking about. That was like 2 months before, right?
Yes, it was 2 months before, and that's as much as we're going to say about it. But yeah, sign up if you want to hear that. But anyway, to get off of that for a second, but you know what?
Because we are not working for Daily Wire.
We are not working for Daily Wire. We are not protected in that way, and we are not going to martyr ourselves in that way. That's not us. That's not us. We are staying on the field, boys and girls. The way to win is to stay on the field.
We'll say Davos ran a very interesting thought experiment around January 2020.
Exactly. I think it was even, well, it must have been, It
was right around there. It was about 2 months before the world ended.
Right, exactly. Anywho, that's just kind of an eerie thing. She taps his knee. Oh yeah, no, you'll be getting those. You'll be getting those laws on the books soon.
Right. Well, and you know who's speaking out about that? The reason what drew my attention to it was last night when we had Tara Reid on. She mentioned that Kim Iverson had done an episode about this. That was actually why I went looking for it. Again, the populist right is talking about it. Very little coverage of this from the left. That, hey, man, you can't just dismiss what Davos says because, again, look at the world we're living in. We are living in the Davos vision. We are living in a vision of the world that would have seemed pretty outlandish when they first started talking about it in the 70s. Look, I'm an aficionado of out-of-print books from the 60s and 70s. Or, things that were popular at the time that have been forgotten. There was a really interesting book called The Peter Principle at that time. And do you know what that means, Keaton?
I'm sorry. I will admit to being a lousy co-host. I was distracted researching something.
That's all right. It happens. Did
you see my eye line wander?
No,
because the thing we were talking about earlier, it actually predates January of 2020. That's what I was looking into.
But anyway,
go ahead.
It was pretty close to that.
Well,
time.
that's when the conference was.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
But the actual thing actually predates. Anyway, I forget it.
All
sorry.
right, so
I shouldn't have done that. That was not professional of me.
No,
I just had to while it was on my mind because I would have forgotten.
The only reason I'm asking you is I'm not sure if it stayed in the popular lexicon, the idea of the Peter Principle. All right, so the Peter Principle it was a pretty well-known figure of speech because of that book for a long time. The idea is that part of what rots out companies is that the incompetent hire the incompetent. You know, once the incompetent get in, they hire more like themselves, and that kind of eats companies away from the inside. But what always stayed with me about the Peter Principle, because I read it long after it had been written, and the introduction is talking about how they're seriously, in the United States in the 70s, talking about having workers on the board of directors of all corporations, as they do in some European countries. And yet, by the 90s, we're living in the Davos world. We're firmly entrenched in this neoliberal Davos vision of the world. So dismiss these people at your own risk, because society was in a very different place when they first started having these Davos meetings. And they were able to quash what was, or they definitely had an influence in quashing what was a very labor worker oriented Western civilization at that time. A lot of the reason we got where we got now is because of Davos.
Well, yeah, just look at the timeline itself pretty much explains
Sure.
that, even if you know very little about anything else, right? What, 1971? I mean, that was really the start of it. I mean, really the Carter years. I mean, this predates those by a few, but the Carter years were really what got neoliberalism rolling.
Yep. Yep.
You know? All right. Well, I think that's our show, is it not?
I think so.
All right. I gotta address this because Zach, you know, I like Zach a lot. Zach is a patron. Zach drops a super chat, but Zach has it in his head that there are certain things I'm not up to speed on. We've said a few times on the show. We've said a few times. There are things we're not going to talk about here. Okay. You wanted me to screen that documentary on our Patreon feed. We can't screen that documentary on the Patreon feed because if we screen the documentary on the Patreon feed, Patreon will turn us off and we will have no Patreon. So there are things we just cannot do that we're not going to do. We're not going to martyr ourselves in that way. There are outlets that will allow us to cover certain things, and there are outlets that won't.
Yeah.
We have to play by those rules, or else we will not have a show. You will not see us anymore. We will disappear. And we've put a lot of work into this show, not to have it turned off by some Yoel Roth type douchebag because they caught us saying the wrong thing. We're savvier than that. That's why we stuck around.
You are savvier than that, and this is what you don't realize, Zach. If I were not being restrained, this show would have been gone a year ago.
And when it's gone, it's gone. When it's gone, we don't get to say anything. When it's gone, you guys don't get to hear from us at all.
Keaton
okay,
is the,
so
Keaton is the brains of the operation, man. Keaton is the one who I say, oh, I want to do a segment about this, who says, I want to keep having a show.
Right.
Okay. My instincts are very, I'm the Jim Morrison of this operation.
We're on Substack. We're on Rumble.
I would burn this whole thing down if you left it up to me.
We're on Substack. We're on Rumble. We're on certain platforms that will allow us more leeway. And one of our New Year's resolutions is to publish material exclusive to those platforms where we can get away with it.
Exactly.
If we can't get away with it in certain forums, then we're not going to push our luck in certain forums because we don't want to lose the forum. We don't want to lose. Look at this community that we've built up here. Look at all these people who know each other, who come here twice a week. They talk to each other. They make each other laugh. They make each other think. You know, we don't want to lose that. We're not going to lose that by slipping up in ways that these big tech douchebags are maybe waiting for us to slip up. So that I hope that addresses your comments. And like I said, Zach, I appreciate your support. You're a patron. You give on the super chat a lot. You engage. So I really like you. But I just have to clear the air on that. It's not that there are things I don't understand. It's that there are things that we simply cannot cover on certain forums in ways that we might like to. And that sucks, but that goes back to the first segment we did, right? Steven Crowder wants $30 million a year and free reign to say whatever he wants and make sure he's going to get paid no matter what. That's not a world we live in. That's not the world we live in. unfortunately. For his sake, I wish it was. But anyway, that's what I got to say about that.
I just want to talk about, Peter Zahan has been going around. He did an interview with Joe Rogan, and he's been talking about some really interesting theories about China. He's basically saying China has 10 years left because their economic growth story seems to be at an end and their population is shrinking. And India is on the verge of overtaking it as the world's most populous nation. And look, in the end, with the geopolitical tension we have with China, the West would love to do business with India instead, right? I mean, if India can pick up a lot of China's manufacturing capacity. So Zayan is going around, basically, to borrow a phrase from Mao, he's saying China's a paper tiger. That all of this about China being the future is much ado about nothing. They have an aging population. People aren't having kids, and their economy is shrinking.
All right, we got a couple more super chats to get to here. Chris Bishop, big tech censorship sucks, but is a sad reality. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. And yes, that's what I think about it too. I mean, we didn't wish it was this way, but you know, we live in the world we live in. All right, we have a new rainmaker here, who's a couple
Making
hours
it
behind.
rain.
All right, so if you're 2 hours behind because you just started the show, you're not gonna know we address your super chat for another couple hours, assuming you stay watching, because apparently you disagree with us on the Crowder thing. One, Crowder never named Daily Wire, so Ben was wrong. No, Ben didn't say he named it.
I mean, Ben knew what
he was talking about and wanted to address it. Right, exactly. Shapiro did such a poor job defending Daily Wire that Daily Wire came out publicly. Yeah, look, we're not Ben Shapiro stands here. I'm not going to defend his statement. I have no interest in doing that. I have absolutely zero interest in the fate of the Daily Wire. But look, maybe you're right. Maybe Ben, didn't do a good job. Maybe that's why their CEO made the hour-long video. But they put out a pretty thorough explanation of what those terms were, and I think they made Crowder look a little ridiculous. But anyway, thank you for the $10, and thank you for this other $10. Maybe I'm hesitate to go off the air. If this guy's 2 hours behind and he's going to donate $10 every 2 minutes, maybe we should just hang out for 2 hours until he catches up. See if he has another one. Because he's not seeing us respond to him now, I don't think. Or she. I don't know if it's a... I think
it's a she based on
maybe
the icon.
A she based on the picture. Nick Reichetta, an attorney, reviewed the Daily Wire response. Nick pointed out that Crowder has been demonetized from YouTube for years. Well, we said that as well. Crowder would likely be taking a pay cut over 4 years. Look, if the terms weren't agreeable to Crowder, he's perfectly within his rights to just say, no thanks, this isn't really right for me. I think I'm going to stay where I'm at. I'm not saying he's an asshole for declining the terms. I'm saying you look a little ridiculous when you decline $12.5 million a year and then act as if Daily Wire is in league with big tech because they want to make sure that if they put you on their platforms, you're not going to get those platforms turned off. Like, that's not a ridiculous position of theirs.
Well, especially when they're dealing with a guy who got demonetized, 3 years ago?
Right, they're dealing with a guy who's already has a history of getting on their bad side, right? So if they're going to make a $50 million investment in you, they want it to come with some assurance that you're going to be careful and play the game the way it has to be played. And like I said, it sucks that it has to be played that way. First to admit that. We talk about that all the time. But that's where they're coming from, and I don't think they were being very unreasonable there.
All right, so this isn't a super chat, but... there is no more globalization. Apparently, our talking points are from the year 2000, according to Boxing Channel guy. That's what he says. And it's climate globalization, but not economic globalization. So you have a Zenith TV, right? Made in America, right? Your TV? Yeah, I'm assuming you have a TV. It's made in America. All the parts made in America. You got the computer you're on right now. Made in America. The phone. It's made in America. Oh, what is that globalization of which we speak?
All righty. Well, it's been a few minutes. We haven't gotten another $10 donation from...
look, somebody got it. Somebody got it. Do you even know what Zenith TV is?
I remember the brand. I remember the name.
It was the very last American TV company.
This is
the
Nikki.
last
This is
one
our
to go out
Twitch
of
agent
business.
here. She's watching on YouTube this evening, not on Twitch.
Hang on, you're hip enough to be on Twitch, and you knew what Zenith was?
I guess so. She's a hip Gen Zer, I assume.
Wow.
I'm assuming Twitch is where the Gen Zers are at. All righty. Well, I believe that does it for us, does it not?
I believe so.
All right. I'm going to put the patron scroll up here so everybody can
look,
see.
yeah, Nikki is like an old Twitch user, so there's hope for us.
Okay. There you go.
We could learn to use the Twitches.
Yeah, we really have no idea how to work it. I would like to know how, because that's one more outlet that we could use. Support the show, patreon.com/DueDissidence, everybody. Before we leave, while we have a big crowd here, I have to plug a very special edition of the Dissident Film Club tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern. We will be live. We are going to be screening a film called The Second Cooler. It's a documentary film narrated by Martin Sheen, directed by our friend Ellen Jimerson. She will be around after the screening to do a talk back and a Q&A with you all. And so we're going to start the film right about 8 o'clock. I'll introduce it, and then we will play it right here, and then we will have a talk back afterwards. So that should be a lot of fun. It's a really good movie. It's right up your alley if you're a fan of this show, because it talks about the immigration issue while integrating NAFTA, for one, which we talked about over the past 2 hours here, and just really, sort of looks under the hood into the economic impact, not only of this country, but in the neighboring nations as well. So it's a really interesting movie, and I'm really excited to show it, and really excited for our talk back with the filmmaker herself, who will be here after the screening. So make sure you tune in. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you like this stream. Make sure you hit that bell for notifications. And make sure that you sign up at Substack, DueDissidence.substack.com. I'm putting the link in the chat right here. This way you get emailed whenever we drop content. You'll also be emailed announcements for when we are about to go live. So if we're going to go live at 8 o'clock, we'll send a Substack email blast with the link to the video a few hours in advance of the stream. So you'll never miss a live show. That's everything we got for tonight. We will see you back here tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern. Make sure you're here for that. That's going to be a lot of fun. Thank you very much. Be safe. Be well. We'll see you next time.
Courage.
See? I waited.
That's my Dan Rather tribute.
Yeah. Russell wanted me to wait to give him an outro, so I did. Just wanted to put that on record.
That's why I want to, I like that crazy bastard.
All right, here. We'll do it one more time. Be safe. Be well. See you next time.
Courage.
Please clap.